share some Valentine's with you, love with you right now. Any current elected officials that wish to be recognized? Hearing none, we're now at agenda address. President Pro Tem Carrington, any requests for agenda address?
Yes, sir. Patrice Waterman.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Members of the 11th Council and Mayor, I'm here tonight to place on record the egregious handling of city funds pertaining to items 7, 8, and 9 from previous administration, the mayor, the finance director, and city attorney. The previous mayor was allowed to use funds that the 10th Council did not allocate in the budget. Removal of such actions were done by resolution and during budget hearings. These people should be held accountable. Item number 7, for $72,000 for the mayor to have a second state of the city. Item number 8 is over budgeted for the law firm. Item number 9, $182,000 for the recreational center payments to the tune of $26,000 and change for 7 months. In hindsight, this was malfeasance of funds, and that is my opinion. And there is no justification for these actions. This is not a reflection upon this mayor, Mayor Grimel, nor this 11th Council. You have to take care of what's before you, and it is so unfortunate. But I would suggest that you send these matters to your finance subcommittee for further resolution. In closing, members of council, please understand that the budget is your fiduciary responsibility. Please understand that. Also, the notes that I presented to you at your transition sessions, examine them thoroughly. It will explain to you what is going on now. Mr. Mayor, I want to personally thank you for acknowledging the 10th Councils at your swearing-in ceremony. And I want to thank you for the gift. Thank you kindly, sir. Also, I want to thank Councilwoman Minister James for acknowledging what some of the things the 10th Council did. Thank you very much, Councilwoman. And in closing, I say thank you and good night.
Thank you. Gloria Miller, you're on here twice. Are you speaking concerning agenda items? Yep.
My fellow colleague, good seeing you. I too am down here tonight to talk about the budget. I pulled it last night and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. We got over $688,000 you guys gonna do a budget amendment for? Really? First of all, we have allegedly, per the mayor, a deficit, okay? Later, I asked you later, Mayor, you said we have a structural deficit. A lot of my constituents doesn't understand what's the difference between the structural and the general fund of having the 19 million. I asked you that later. But I'm gonna address the agenda item of the 5 or 6 items on the budget. There's no way, I too feel that you should wait and get your audit first, because you're probably gonna find a lot of more discrepancies. And then what you're gonna do is just keep piling on, and then we keep going deeper in the hole. Because these items, it's just like erasing the 10th Council, like we didn't see all this stuff. It was a reason that they weren't paid. And I went through Marco just to add them up. They have of the budget amendment tonight of those items, $300 and some thousand. This is asinine crazy. I couldn't believe it last night. I was sitting up reading it and adding up things. I'm just asking the council, I just want to see what happens tonight. Because that would be really asinine for the residents to pay this kind of money to an administration. You need to have your forensic audit. And so they can find all the discrepancies. That's what they do. And allow this council just to run the day-to-day operation of the city till you see where you are. You're going into the blind and you don't know where you are. Because I'm sure you're going to find more things that probably been done. Because I was there, while they said I was up there screaming, you're going to see a lot of stuff. And all I'm saying to this council is, you're covered. It's, to me, it's like a cover-up. Don't do that. Put it out there for the citizens to see what happened with this last council and how the spending went awry. Spending $200,000 for the rec center. I screamed and hollered up there for 5-6 months. It stopped, but it wasn't stopped. Now I'm asking you, Mayor, and the council, you guys up there, people elect you, tell them what happened. Tell them the story. Show them what happened. Because we got a lot of money missing. I said, I'm going to put it out there because I was on council. I know what I'm talking about. I have the books. And all I want to say to everyone, 300-some thousand to Gianmarco. Gianmarco worked here. They know what happened. They were working for the mayor. Why didn't they get paid? Her string is in her hands.
That concludes your time.
Thank you. Ms. Billy Swayzer.
If you prefer public comment, we can make that adjustment if that's when you want to sign up.
Okay. Dr. Deidre Waterman.
Good evening. Although I'm supposed to be on vacation, I've gotten so many calls about just the thing Councilwoman Miller and Patrice Waterman were talking about that I thought I needed to come to set that correct. And I think it may have been something you inadvertently said, Mayor Grano, which you partially corrected, but there's still a lot of confusion. And that's what you said at that, I think you deferred that there was a deficit. And people said, wait a minute, Mayor, we don't have a deficit. I thought you told us there was a surplus. There is a surplus, and there has been for the last at least 3 years. I think we started with $19 million about 3 years ago. I don't have the finance director here, but about that. And it's come down a little bit as we've had savings to spend on extra services for people. So when I started out, we were way down here. Okay, started out with $20 million deficit, my first budget. That was a real
Dr. Waterman,
deficit.
are you addressing an item on the agenda?
I am, because it alluded that this was the reason for the forensic
Order,
audit.
please. This is agenda
It
address.
alluded that this was the reason for the forensic audit,
Keep it
and that's
tight
what
to the
people don't
agenda
understand.
addressed, please.
That's what I'm addressing.
Please do.
I'm addressing the forensic audit. So that is where we were, but you took about 10 minutes. So I'm just trying to correct what people were inferred. They said there's a forensic audit because there's a deficit. There is no deficit. We have a surplus, okay? It's been a surplus every year for the last 3 years. We have almost 50% at one time. The normal requirement for a city of our size is about this much of surplus. So we have this much more than we actually need. So what happens is that gives us a little extra that we can spend every year for services we want to do, all right? So it's been coming down a little bit as we've had this. It's like having more savings in the bank so you can buy a bigger car, things like that. That's what's happening with the city. Last couple of weeks ago when we had the snow, everybody was happy that they started the snow plowing with 3 inches of snow, not like 6 inches like we had before. But because we had this surplus, the council before this one said, let's start the snow plowing at 3 inches. That cost twice as much. So with that surplus, we've been spending a little extra for more services. Now, Mayor, you corrected part of that. It's not a deficit, it's a surplus that we are spending down on. It's because we don't need this much. Cities require about this much.
That concludes your time.
Okay, you took about 10 minutes of my time, but I think I got
Order.
the idea. Took about 10
Order.
seconds of
I
my
stopped
time,
the
but
clock
I think
as
I
the
got
audience can see to
that. Okay. All right.
recompensate for
I
that.
just wanted to correct that because that's a misconception that was put out and people had that question.
Pro Tem Carrington, are there any other agenda address requests?
Yes. Ms. Shayla Ray, are you here for agenda address or various items that are not on the agenda tonight? Okay.
We'll shift you to public comment.
Yes. And we have one more name, President. I can't read it.
H. Bill Maxey. Mr. Maxey, are you here for public comment or agenda address? Okay.
All right. That's all for agenda address.
Thank you. We're now at discussion items. Mayor Grimal administration, forensic audit process progress update. You have the floor.
Thank you, President McGinnis. I want to provide some context to the forensic audit, especially in light of some of the comments this evening. So I want to begin by saying it's disappointing to see so many former elected officials focus on trying to protect or defend their reputation rather than the facts before us. And the facts before us are very clear, and I've been very clear about them in the past, and I'll be clear about them again this evening. I didn't create these facts. They were created by previous elected officials. But the facts remain the facts, and that is that we do, in fact, have a year-to-year deficit to the tune of about $3 million, which has been reducing the fund balance quite substantially. And the previous administration was not very forthright about that year-to-year deficit, and I believe that we have to be forthright and honest with our residents and our citizens about the full and complete financial picture facing us. The purpose of the forensic audit is not primarily about the year-to-year deficit, although that's certainly a consideration. The purpose of the forensic audit is primarily because the previous mayoral administration spent money in ways it was never authorized to spend by the previous city council. And that is former Councilwoman Patrice Waterman's point, it's former City Councilwoman Gloria Miller's point, is that money was spent in ways that was not legally authorized. And we have a full agenda this evening to try to both get the truth out about that, to the point of some of the speakers, but also to actually have the spending that did occur reflected in the budget. This is spending, to Councilwoman Miller's point, this is spending that has already happened. We're not authorizing new spending. This is spending that already happened. But we have an obligation to reflect that reality in the current budget. This is money that went out the door, and we're not just going to stick our head in the sand and pretend it didn't happen. We're going to come and seek authority from City Council to acknowledge and recognize the financial reality that has occurred in the middle of this financial year. It's very important that we, as the executive branch, the mayoral administration, not take action unilaterally without City Council's sign-off. That's part of my longstanding commitment to collaborate with City Council. And part of that is making sure that the budget for this fiscal year reflects spending that has already occurred and both accommodate needed future spending. And that's what these agenda items are about, and it's also why we need a forensic audit. The forensic audit RFP went out some time ago. It was authorized at the very first meeting that this City Council had on January 4th. The very first item that I proposed was this forensic audit, to authorize the forensic audit and put out an RFP soliciting proposals from accounting firms to conduct it. The deadline to respond to that RFP was last Monday, 8 days ago, and we received 9 proposals from accounting firms. These are accounting firms from all across the county, all across the country, rather. There's one from Detroit, but there are lots from everywhere from the West Coast to the East Coast and everywhere in between. These are well-respected, generally, accounting firms, and it's very important that we collaboratively, between the executive branch and council, select a firm that we believe is going to dig into the truth about past spending without fear or favor. And that's why we wanted to immediately put these proposals from the accounting firms before City Council. We got them all in last Monday, 8 days ago. We had to have the City Council agenda to the City Clerk last Thursday to present to Council. And we wanted to immediately share all 9 proposals in their entirety with Council and with the general public, which is why they're found online. And we have not yet had an opportunity to identify a recommendation because we want to do that in partnership with City Council. And with that, I'll allow the Deputy Mayor to add anything that he'd like to add to that process. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. The only thing I will add is I do believe the mayor said that we do have a review committee that has been put together, which does include someone from council, and that meeting should be scheduled next week for us to get through this, and we are really looking forward to getting everything in front of you as quickly as possible. I think that I would also like to just add that, this is about day 45 of the new council, the new executive administration, and we are doing everything in our power not only to proverbially keep the trains running, but also to make the changes that we need to make in order to get the city moving in the direction that we all want it to move.
Thank you. Council members that wish to have the floor. Councilman Nicholson.
Hi. So I'm the chair of the Finance and Personnel Committee. We had our first meeting, got an update on this matter. In that the partnership between the administrative branch and the legislative is that as that chair, I will be on that audit selection committee. So I'll be there to review all of these options and be able to take that back to our subcommittee and then a council at large of updates of what's going on as related to the audit proceeding. I want to make it very clear, too, that in case it wasn't already, that the council's election period, when we're elected, we walk into a budget that's already running. We walk into a budget that was approved, and expenses and all of the revenues have already started to come in, and it's already been spent. So what's on the line, and you look at some of these items, you're not only talking about large law, our law firm, you're talking about an event in which small businesses in Pontiac were engaged. And as a small business owner, if I was approached by the mayor and asked to do catering or asked to provide linen service or asked to sing, and I signed a contract or I got a handshake and I sent that bill in and never got paid, I would feel very hard-pressed to do an event like that again, or to lend my services or my expertise to the city again. And they don't look at it as this mayor or that mayor. They look at it as the city of Pontiac. So some of the decisions we have to make tonight is do we write these checks, and this will largely be discussion, but do we write these checks to Mr. and Mrs. Pontiac, not just Gianmarco Law Firm or other large vendors or contractors that had been engaged without council's approval. So there is that aspect. As we consider that moving forward, we also then, doesn't mean if we decide to write those checks, we will still consider what is the city's ability to then recuperate those funds, or what is our obligation to legally pursue these matters. Those two things can be held and thought of separately. So I don't want anyone to ever feel like us writing that check to blank catering service means that the city is going to continue in that way, or the city is not going to fully inspect what our obligations or our opportunities are past writing that check.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rutherford, and then Mayor Grimal.
So first off, there have been people who have had RFPs or bills that are due for over a year for events they have already performed their services. I'm not going to put their names out, but I can name 5 of people who were told by people that they were going to get paid in a timely fashion for catering, for playing music, for singing, for performing, and they have not been paid. And so at the end of the day, we are held accountable to that. That's the first thing. Number 2, Mayor Grimal, I thank you for your transparency, because you have to call a spade, even if it makes people feel uncomfortable. Number 3, when we first got into office, the Honorable Patrice Waterman gave us a blueprint, a book for us to go by so that we understood what we were walking into. And so I think it's very important that we tell y'all the truth, even if it makes certain people feel uncomfortable. Because the truth of the matter is, stuff was overspent. The truth of the matter is, let me make sure I say it right, $182,000 was never authorized by the previous 10th council. Is that not correct? Okay, I'll wait. And so if $182,000 was authorized by the previous council, that means we got to pay them, do we not? Or we gonna get sued? So let's just pick bare minimum, that has to be paid. So at some point, all your bills, as my grandma always say, gonna come due. And these bills are due, whether we like it, whether it makes us feel right, they're due. That's it. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor Grimal, you have the floor.
Well, that's very well said, Councilwoman. And I do just want to reiterate, the vast majority of this spending already occurred by the previous administration. The previous administration had already written the vast majority of these checks. Not quite all of them, but the vast majority of them. That money went out the door before January 4th under the previous administration. We're simply amending the budget to try to make sure that this budget reflects expenditures that already occurred this fiscal year. Now, there are some additional bills that we've been asked to pay by those who provided services to events put on by the previous administration in December or before. And that's what Councilman Nicholson's referring to and Councilwoman Rutherford. And the large majority of those bills are for Pontiac residents and Pontiac small businesses that provided services at the request of the previous administration and were not paid. And we believe that we should not stiff those people. We believe that we should, in fact, pay those folks for services that were rendered. But we, as the mayoral administration, don't want to do that without city council approval. And so that's part of tonight's budget amendment as well, because we don't want to do what the previous administration did and spend money without council approval. But we also don't want to stiff people who in good faith provided services when asked to do so. And so that's why we're making this ask of council tonight to approve this so that we can move forward and pay people for services that were rendered in good faith.
Other, Councilman Nicholson, Councilman Goodman?
I mean, just to add to all of that, I mean, Pontiac as a city is already looked at in a separate light from our other neighbors in Oakland County. We all know that. And I think the last thing that we want to do is also have the reputation for, hey, we have small businesses here, and even our city government doesn't pay them. Why would that ever incentivize, one, any Pontiac resident to ever do anything for the city government or even want to be here? And secondly, how does that incentivize people to eventually come here and open up businesses if we aren't going to do good on contracts, essentially, that they provided a service for the city? I mean, the unfortunate part of doing this job, and I think I speak for everyone up here, is that there is a line between wanting to do what is the thing that will punish the person which has done it, and then also having to have the responsibility of doing right by the 61,000 residents who live in the city of Pontiac. And unfortunately, as everyone has pointed out, these are chickens that have to come home to roost. We don't have an option other than, hey, thank you for doing what you did, but because of who the person that did it, screw you. We aren't in a position really to do that. It's not the sound thing for us to do. That's all.
Thank you. Mayor Gramel, a question from me for the administration. Do you want to give us a sense of what are the ideal targets for timeline for when further items might come to this full council for the firm selection, for example?
We're hoping to have a recommendation, probably not in time this week for next Tuesday's city council agenda, but I think certainly at the latest for the following city council agenda. So we anticipate that we'll have a recommendation, a joint recommendation of the council's representative and the executive branch, not for the February 22nd meeting, but for the March 1st council meeting. And we would ask for city council at that March 1st council meeting to approve the hiring of that recommended forensic audit firm so that they can then get to work. And our hope is that they would complete their work within a couple of months, I think, at the outset, although some of that may depend on what firm is selected and what their capacities are and how quickly they can do that. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't want to wait to bring forward some of these budget items until after the forensic audit for a couple of reasons. First of all, the forensic audit, yes, is likely to uncover more items. But we believe that we should be transparent both with city council and with the public in a timely way and not wait to disclose things until 2 or 3 months down the road after a forensic audit firm has completed its work. The other item is we don't think that these small business vendors, these Pontiac residents who provided goods and services in good faith should have to wait another 2 or 3 months in order to get paid after they've already been waiting a couple months, and in some cases longer than that. So that's why we wanted to move forward with these budget amendments as we discovered these problems without waiting for the forensic audit work to be completed.
Thank you. Others that wish to have the floor? So this is a discussion item. It was an update for this council and the public to know where things stand now. more developments and council action to come on that as well. Mayor Grimal, administration, do you want to share for the public and this body the implications to the financial health to our city if we were to not pay these obligations or not reconcile the budget offsets, if you will?
Well, yes, thank you. So a couple of things. One is if we don't pay vendors who provided goods and services in good faith, we're likely to get sued by those vendors. So that obviously has its own financial ramifications. But we have to make sure that the budget reflects actual expenditures and actual revenues. And so as now good stewards of the city's money and finances, we need to make sure that the budget accurately reflects expenditures that have been made in the past, and we need to do that in a timely way. If we fail to do that, and we have spending that is going on but not reflected in the budget, we're likely to be out of compliance with GASB, our accounting standards, and other standards, both legal and moral, to make sure that we're being transparent with the public and being good stewards of the city's finances. And so, yes, we're very concerned about the fact that this current year the city expended $3 million more than it's taking in. Yes, we have a fund balance, a savings account, if you will, that can cover that. But that savings account does not last forever. And that's what a structural deficit means, is that the spending is not sustainable. Yes, we have a savings account, but spending $3 million more this year than we're taking in is not sustainable, and it's going to reduce that savings account, that fund balance, by that $3 million.
Thank you. Any final discussion on this item? Hearing nothing further, we're now at the second and final discussion. Letter B, Mill Street Reconstruction Project. Administration, you have the floor.
Siddiqui, take it away.
Sorry, this is not as interesting as the other discussions, but
There's gold under Mill Street.
so for